Hey everybody, good morning. Welcome to the Master Books Teaching Tips Facebook Live. Today I want to talk about questions and asking the right questions, teaching our students to ask the right questions. I think for most of us, we want our children to be successful, not only in our academic pursuits, but also in life. And so this is a little bit more of a life skill, but I do think that it definitely applies to our school and our academics as we go forward. So one of the concepts that I taught on Tuesday when I was talking about the Stovall was the Bloom's taxonomy of learning. And that concept really is we're learning different things. There are different levels of learning. We're remembering is the very basic, where I see a fact, 2 + 2 = 4. Then we move to understanding. Well, what does that mean, 2 + 2 = 4? It's more than just thinking on a card. There's actually, if there's 2 and then there's 2 and I count them all, there's 4. So now I don't just remember the fact, but I also have an understanding. Can I apply that to the real world? Applying facts, rules, concepts, and ideas. How does that actually apply? Chris, our IT expert, was in today talking, and he said he hated math. And Chris is a genius. He hated math, and his dad said, let's go build a birdhouse. And as he was teaching him to build a birdhouse, he said, okay, measure this. And then Chris would measure, and he'd say, okay, what does that equal? And then Chris had to calculate it, and he realized, math is practical, and it has application. So I'm not just remembering 2 + 2 = 4, understanding that it's the combination of numbers. I'm also beginning to apply that, and then I can get into more technical things like analyzing data, evaluating the data, and then coming up with parts to make a new whole. This concept is fantastic for helping our kids as we evaluate a curriculum. It's at a very base level. You're just memorizing facts and figures, which is the easiest to do. It doesn't take a lot. It's also the easiest for a lot of curriculums to write that. It becomes much harder when you go from just remembering 2 + 2 = 4 to understanding, applying, evaluating, analyzing, and creating. And so as we're talking about asking good questions, right? Hey, it's good to see everybody joining in. If you have any questions, be sure to ask, or comments. I love to have some interaction on this topic. We want our children to succeed, and I believe that the quality of questions we learn to ask have a direct impact on the quality of our life. So let me give you an example. One of my sons is in 6th grade. He is what you would consider a smaller stature, right? He hasn't hit his growth stride yet. And he has just moved. He's a young 6th grader, so he's just moved into a middle school youth group at a new church. And so he is in with 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. And as I see him lined up with his class at different times, I think, my goodness, some of these 8th graders, almost 9th graders, are men. Like they're huge, and he looks so small compared to them. So he goes to a youth event, which is a dodgeball game. And in the dodgeball game, he's playing against these 8th grade men. And he's retelling the story of how he actually was able to come very close to winning in the dodgeball game. The way he did it was he asked himself, how can I win? What is their weakness? And he found out that some of the older kids had weaknesses like they wouldn't, when they threw the ball, they turned. And so he would wait until they threw the ball, turn and were off balance, and he would throw and hit them and get them out. Now, at that moment, I'm very proud, right? Because you get what you lead. And my mascot is the underdog. That's what I like. And so for me, he asked good questions. Now, he could have come out of that situation. He could have gone into a dodgeball situation with these huge kids, very athletic and strong and everything else. And he could have said to himself, hey, how come I have to be so small? Or how is this fair that I have to play with these men? That type of thing. but he didn't. He asked, how can I win? Yeah, the odds are stacked against me and there's difficulty, but how can I win this situation? And what the questions we ask ourselves really take us to a different place, don't they? If he had asked himself, how is this fair? Why am I so small? The place that his mind would have gone to would have been more to a place of a victim, where I don't have any say in this matter. I'm small, the odds are against me, and I have no way of winning this, and I'm not going to be satisfied with that. That would be a lot like a bad brain place. If he had asked himself what he did, asking himself, what can I do to win? That takes you to a whole different place, doesn't it? How is this fair? How can I possibly win one way versus how can I win? Takes his brain to a place where he says, well, in order to win, I have to look for making sure I look out for the danger spots. I take advantage of other people's, the weaknesses in this case, that I do everything in my favor to get to my end goal. And asking the right question either makes us a victim or a victor. And I think that it's important for our kids to understand that the questions they're asking themselves will prepare them for life to either be victims or victors. Quality questions I feel that my kids need to ask when they come into a situation is, what do I want from this experience? Now, I don't think our kids always understand that. I don't think when Chris's dad took him out to build a birdhouse to understand why he needed to do math, I don't think that he at that moment understood that. That was a coaching and a teaching experience to teach him that what we're looking for is, why do we need to learn math? What value does that have? And Chris very quickly understood that was exactly how practical math is to him. And if he wants to do the things he enjoys, he's going to have to understand and develop the practical skill of mathematics. So what do I want from this experience is a question I think our kids need to ask. I think we need to learn to ask that as well, and model that and teach our kids how to do that, have that discussion with them. The second thing that I think needs to be developed for our kids is to ask, what can I do to make this better? So all of our kids share rooms, and they love that, obviously. And they can easily blame the other person for the situation of a messy room or whatever. But the thing that they need to ask themselves is, in that situation, what can they do to make that situation better? They can contribute to it in a positive way. They can even help clean it up if it means that much to them. So they can, two things in a place like that. I have a messy room. Why can't they keep their room clean? Does put the burden on them, and it makes me the victim, and it does take responsibility from them, from the other person. But asking them, what can I do? I want a clean room. What can I do to make this situation better? How can I help affect this situation? Is a better question, I believe, for our kids to ask than a question that just makes them victims to the fact that their brother or sister is messy and is making their environment a bad place. Now, sometimes what can they do to make it better is just going and talking to mom and dad and saying, I'm trying really hard to make my room clean, and so isn't cooperating. What do you suggest? That's also part of the solution, but it doesn't just sit there and become self-pity. The third that I think is important is, why is this happen? Or if it's already happened, what can I learn from this? What is the takeaway to this? So sometimes bad things happen and sometimes challenges happen. But rather than sitting in a bad place and letting my brain turn this into a bad experience, can I turn this into a learning experience and ask myself, what is the takeaway from this? As a pastor, when I was pastoring, I can't stand to sit in a long sermon. I can't do it. And I tried really hard to keep my messages under 20 minutes. I figured if I can't say what I've got to say in 20 minutes, then you don't need to hear it. Everybody's different. That was my approach. And I figured, you know what, I'm in it for the long haul. So I don't have to tell you everything I know today. I've got 20 minutes. Wish my Facebook lives for 20 minutes. But okay, so I enjoyed keeping things simple, but what I always wanted everybody to come away with was, what's the takeaway of what we're trying to talk about, and how do you apply this so that it's not just basic information that maybe you'll remember, but that you actually take ownership of it, and that you begin to say, okay, here's some information I've just been given. What can I do to apply this to my life today to start living a better life, or a more successful life in Christ? And I think when we start taking on that mindset of asking good questions, we really start looking for opportunities. I think our brain automatically begins looking for opportunities to move forward in a positive way. Let's bring it home, okay? So let's talk about homeschools. It's very easy in a homeschool culture to look around ourselves and say, okay, so my spouse isn't helping. I wish my spouse was more like so-and-so spouse. Or how am I supposed to homeschool in the home that I have? I don't have a good schoolroom, and I'm limited. How am I supposed to homeschool here? Or maybe it's on the kids. Why can't my kids get this? Why aren't my kids understanding this? What's their problem? And when I principaled at a school, and this was one of my big challenges with teachers as well, was they would sit and meet and say, well, Johnny isn't learning such and such. I don't know what we're supposed to do with him, because he just comes to school and he doesn't learn. And the question that they weren't looking at, that I would continually to say, is to say, let's look at this differently. This child has been placed in your classroom. What a privilege that is. You're going to be in this classroom with them all year long. Putting the burden on the student and saying, why won't they learn, is kind of unfair. What needs to happen is to be able to say, okay, how do I connect with this student? How do I make learning fun for the student? How do I make this a better experience? Versus sitting there and feeling sorry for themselves because the student wasn't engaged. I wouldn't be engaged either. Now, the student also has a responsibility, and I think that that's coaching and training that has to happen, that they have to ask themselves the same thing. What can I do to make this situation better? What can I learn? All of those types of things. And I think it's very complicated with students in the training process and developing this process. But when I have a homeschool, and I'm looking at the negatives, my spouse, the environment I have, the quality of my children, that sounds harsh, the curriculum that we have, we need to ask good questions there, right? It does me no good to say, well, my spouse is worthless and I wish they were like so-and-so's. They're not like so-and-so. I have the spouse that I chose, and what can I do to make that relationship better? What can I do to take advantage? Like, what opportunities in the house that God has placed me in the neighborhood, in the community, with the people he has, what can I do to make this better? And then I have choices. We can choose to change communities. We can choose to homeschool differently. We can choose to go to the library in school, or find another place to school outside of the home if we wanted to. There's options that we have if we just look at it from a question that puts me in a victim place, then I just stay a victim. If I look at it more from the question of, what can I do to make my homeschool better? Use what strengths do we have? We've talked about SWOT analysis and different things, mission statements on these teaching tips. All of that plays into this right now, because it gives you a destination. It gives you clarity of goals and where you're going. And these are things that as you develop this in your homeschool, and you're going to automatically start teaching your kids and developing this for your homeschool. Desiree says, no spouse is perfect. because nobody is perfect, right? All of us are human, and all of us, apart from the saving work of Jesus Christ, not much hope. Okay, so the questions I ask. So I put up a video of a poem, The Crooked Path, or it's the Calf's Path, I think was the name of it. And I love that analogy of one day a calf goes through a field and creates a very small path. The next day a dog comes, goes through that path, and now it gets a little bit wider. And hundreds of years later, an entire community is using this crooked path simply because it was the easiest route, and it's what, but a calf with crooked legs who kind of stumbled along his way did it. If you didn't watch the video, I'd encourage you to watch it, because I think it's a great discussion place as well. When we ask ourselves, why do we do things the way we do? And sometimes I think it's good to ask that question. But the reason that I posted that was to talk just a little bit about, again, the brain science, right? So our brains have these neural pathways. The first time through, kind of like that crooked calf, we kind of get their process bumping and stumbling over here, and maybe there's a little negative here, and we stumble to a positive, and we end up at our destination, or what we believe to be our destination. The second time we need to go to that destination, our brain will naturally kind of wander through the same way that there was, because there's already a pathway. If you think about it, if you've ever gone to a field that had waist-high grass in it, and you've got to walk through that field, how awful that is. Same with snow, right? If you're walking through a path and snow is waist deep, the first time is really difficult. Once you've done it, the second time is so much easier. And the more you do it, the easier it continues to get walking down that path. Our brains operate the same way. And once we have a well-worn path, it's very difficult to convince ourselves to find a better way, because it's easier on this path. So even though I'm going miles around, I'm going through pain spots and friction points and all of these things, it's a well-worn path. And so I want to make sure, Laura says, I was thinking that about my husband's spouse. I got distracted. That's funny. This well-worn path, for some of us, this was me in my life, I didn't ask good questions. And so it was very easy for me for many, many years to look around and think that it was other people's responsibility to provide for my success and my happiness. And so you have to be very conscious in the situations that we come to begin really even saying, okay, what is a good question here? What should I be asking myself? Not only should I be asking myself, but now how do I make this different? How do I make life different that will help those around me and help me be more successful in this situation? But because the brain wants to go through this well-worn path that happens from the time we're young kids until the time we're adults. And we also have to be conscious that it's not just taking, like for my son, the desired outcome, what I want to train him as a desired outcome is to be successful in the dodgeball game, to present a position where he's recognized as a leader, that he's recognized as a good sport when he's out, that he stays optimistic and recognizes this is a small game. It's not, my life isn't dependent on it. All of those things are quality. It's as rewarding sometimes for our kids to get sympathy. And so it would be as rewarding for us to say, it's okay, buddy, you're the best. And you don't need to work at it. And it's unfair that they put you in a class where there are giants and you have to figure out the challenges. That's just not fair. That would be rewarding as well, because he would be comforted from that. He would receive affirmation from that. So it takes a lot of conscious work to say, hey, bud, too bad you lost. What could you have done to have changed the outcome of that game? Life doesn't change. I'm never going, I've got what I've got as far as how tall I am, how strong I am. I can work at those things, but I can't change my height. I can't change sometimes the circumstances of the people I work with or the people I share a room with or those things. The only thing I have capacity to change immediately is here and here. And so that's what I believe we want to begin training our kids to do, is to ask better questions when it comes to life circumstances. In school, why do I need to learn history? Angela's here, so she can answer that. There are some questions that I don't know that I have answers to. So if you're watching and you fully know why I should learn algebra, I would love it if you would post that in the comments. Not that I don't think you should. I would just love to hear the responses as to why we should learn algebra. But history, I fully can understand and appreciate the lessons that are learned in history and the lessons that other people experienced. Maybe there were good questions that those people could have asked themselves. And so even as you're going through the history, knowledge is so limited, right? To understand what year so-and-so discovered something outside of learning context, it has some value. But the value of beginning to understand why that discovery was important, how that discovery changed mankind, and how that discovery is applied to our lives today, how we can utilize or take parts of that discovery and apply it to our lives, those forcing them up into a higher level of thinking, I think really has value, as opposed to putting a book in front of them and saying, you need to learn about this event in history without helping them to ask good questions. What do they expect? What's the outcome, right? And we've talked a lot about what is your outcome? What is the mission statement you have? Does everything you're doing, does it help contribute to the success of what you're trying to do in the mission statement? But then now asking the student, when it comes to history and what we just learned, can you apply that to your life? What's the takeaway? What's the takeaway when we learn about a person like Christopher Columbus? Certainly don't want to start that discussion here, but what's the takeaway? And when we see the way people have mistreated each other, and we understand that, what's the takeaway that you can have from that? And in your own life, what can you do to apply this information to your own life and make life better, not just for yourself, but also for those around you? Why does that matter? Because, as Zig Ziglar says, if I do enough things for other people, let's see, how do you say it? Something to the effect of, if I do enough good things for other people, I don't have to worry about my needs being met. When I look out for the needs of those around me, I don't have to worry about my needs being met. And so we treat other people as we would like to be treated. We esteem them as higher than ourselves. It's a biblical principle, but not only is it a biblical principle, it is the best way to win friends and influence others. And so when I ask good questions about why I should treat somebody better than myself, I think we discover good answers. So hopefully this was helpful in your homeschool. If you have any questions, is there a way to work on a way of thinking as adults? I can't give my kids what I don't have. Tabitha, I 100% agree. And for me, even still, I am so thankful. My kids are so much more mature than me, so they bring me back to reality a lot, because they know what I want to accomplish in life is to have a good attitude, to look for ways to be successful, to grow as a family. And so sometimes they'll even kind of give me that look like, I don't think you're really in a healthy brain, and it's not helpful to anybody around you. So I think one of the best things you can do is step back and begin asking yourself the questions. Today, with what I've got before me, homeschooling, family, housework, relationships, whatever, is there something that I'm doing that isn't helping? Is there something I can do to make these situations a better experience for myself and for those around me? In our homeschools, housework, sometimes with housework and the cleaning, we have to have a realistic expectation. We have to simplify and get rid of things or make life a little bit easier and have a reset. But at least I'm not just overwhelmed by the burden and shamed by it, right? I'm actually proactive in asking, what am I doing here? And I think that we come into that place in our relationships too. I can be overwhelmed in a relationship. I can be deeply hurt by somebody in a relationship, and I may have to actually grieve that hurt. But that doesn't mean that I can't do something today or in the very near future to begin making things better, even if it's distance. So I think just beginning to ask yourself those questions. And then as a family, sometimes, and we've done this, sit down and say, I think our family needs a reset. I think our family needs to learn to ask better questions. Like when something comes up, rather than asking questions that make us victims or put us at the mercy of others, let's begin asking questions about how can we change things? How can we do things differently so that we get the life that we want? We serve the Lord in the capacity that He's called us to. How can we do that? So let's see. I have such a concrete answer to things that thinking critically doesn't come out. Yeah, so the other thing, Tabitha, I would say is part of coaching is asking people, asking them good questions to have them find the answers. So just asking in the situation of my son playing dodgeball, asking him questions to tell us what happened, asking him sometimes if we notice that they've gone negative, even beginning to just say, well, why do you feel it went that way? And asking, well, because I'm so small. Well, who told you that? And why, just continually to ask them questions, leading them to the answers that you hope that they choose for themselves, which is essentially, who can change it? If you want to be part of this group, you have two options. You can opt out of the youth group, or you can participate. If you can participate, you have to find a way to be successful. Who can change that? How does that look? And let them walk into the solution for that. So you model it by your example. You can help coach and guide them a little bit, and you can coach them through asking them to give you good answers that lead to that play. Desiree says, ask, pray, admit that you don't have the resources, ask God to help. 100%. Scripture says if we ask for wisdom, God will give us wisdom. And wisdom, thankfully, is so much more than knowledge. It's the ability to apply it. And I have seen this so many times. If we will just take the time to say, God, give me the wisdom here, He will. He'll give you answers. Because he says He will, and His Scripture is truth. Going to challenge my critical thinking skills, which are somewhat weakness. Barely ahead of my kids some days. Yeah. So I've said this before, and I'll close with this, but based on Laura's comment that she feels she's barely ahead of her kids, I am growing with my kids every single day. Truth. We are all part of a fallen race, and we all come short of the glory of God. I do. My children do. If you think of somebody who's running a race or maybe a mentoring position, I'm a few steps ahead of my kids, but not that far in the scope of eternity, right? So sometimes I can look back and say, hey guys, what you're doing isn't going to help. You need to change this. And I can give a little bit of reinforcement, but I'm not Jesus Christ. I am a parent, but I need to encourage them to go to Christ for strength, I'm not that. So, I think I get what I lead. I model behavior that I want them to model. I do instruct, we do discipline, but I have to be aware there's only so much I can do, and that I am part of, I'm alongside them, and I'm walking together with them. My goal, and this was my commitment in anything that I'm involved in leadership with, is I'll be the first one off to get on. I'll be the first one on the battlefield, the last one to leave. We all go home together, and there's room for growth. And if you go down, I'm going to come alongside you, and I'm going to help you. If I go down, I want you to come alongside me and help me, and we all go home together. And my goal is ultimately my children to be in the eternal presence of Jesus Christ right next to me, and that I will hear, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant." And so all this other stuff is part of that process. But I do think I'm just a few steps ahead of my kids. And in some places, my adult children now have even, because they had an advantage, I think, in some places with homeschooling and discipleship and whatnot. They're ahead of me now in the game. And so I'm encouraged by them. I'm blessed by them, and I'm blessed to see them successful. Okay. Let's see. Wonderful. We aren't given a prayer limit for the day. Yeah. But parenting is such a blessing, because it's in parenting is how I'm able to experience the relationship I have with God the Father. I love my kids, and I accept my kids, their weaknesses, their challenges, their strengths. I value that, and yet so often I see who they are in my relationship with them, in me in my relationship with Father God. And oftentimes I have an experience in the physical realm with my children that will lead me to repentance in my spiritual relationship with God the Father. And because I just realized, wow, I'm the one who goes back to the same habit, to the same pattern. I'm the one who does the same stupid thing, and then gets mad at you when it doesn't work the way I want it to. And yeah, so that's a whole nother thing. Okay. Thinking like culture tells us, yeah, culture, Angela, culture, I think culture more times than not, the way culture is telling us to do things is completely counter to biblical authority. And may I be so bold as to say that sometimes the culture of the church is counter to biblical authority, and we miss out on what the ultimate benefit that God had for us as his children because of that. So I think it's good to question, in my parenting practices, in my marriage, in my home, in my relationships, everything else, is this healthy? Is this working? Is this doing what it should be doing? Those times for reflection are important. And you know what? One of the biggest obstacles to reflection is right here, my cell phone. This consumes so much energy. Facebook or my cell phone or tablet or whatever it is, consumes so much energy, and we've almost gotten to the place where stillness and quiet and a place to reflect is really hard to do. But I think it's valuable, because if not, our brain just keeps going down that crooked path, and we waste so much energy that we really only have so much life energy given to us in the period of time that God has granted us. So, all right. Once again, I hope this is a blessed conversation. I hope it helps and blesses your homeschool. I really do appreciate the feedback, and knowing that some of the things we've talked about has been working for your families and making things a better place. We enjoy also seeing the homeschool wins, and just that's so exciting. So God bless you guys. Have a great weekend. We continue to pray and bless the homeschool dads, that the Lord is doing a magnificent thing in their lives, and he is stirring up in them a mighty spirit. So, all right. Talk to you guys later.